Hi, and welcome to this section of the Basic Math Word Problem Tutor. And in this section, we're going to talk about word problems that deal with subtracting whole numbers. Whole numbers being numbers like 7 or 10 or 13. No fractions, no decimals, just whole numbers, and we're going to have to subtract them. Now, in the last section, the section before this one, we were talking about problems that have you add whole numbers together. And in this section, we're going to concentrate on word problems that have you subtract the numbers and then things that you have to know when to subtract the numbers. So that's a real tricky point sometimes to figure out in a problem when you have to add these numbers together and when you have to subtract these numbers together. And it's not always clear when you have to add them and when you have to subtract them. So we're trying to get some practice here through working some problems. But the number one thing you have to do, you have to be able to do this. It will make your life so much easier. Is just to try to understand what the problem is really asking you. And then when you understand what the problem's truly asking you and stop trying to fumble around with just working some math out, just understand what it's asking you, then you will understand if you have to add or subtract or multiply or divide or whatever it is, okay? So here are some tips. When you're dealing with problems that have you subtract whole numbers or subtract any numbers, okay? Usually, not always, but usually, there'll be some catchphrases in there that you can watch for. Things like this. How much more, okay, is one of the phrases. How much more does this cost than that, okay? That kind of tells you, okay, well, if this costs $10 and this costs $5, how much more did this cost than that? Well, that tells you that you're trying to find out what's the difference between the two things. How much more did it cost? It's not asking you to add it up for the total. It's not asking you to find the sum. It's just saying how much more. So this costs this much and something else costs this much. How much more is how much is over here? So how much more is one of those words and key phrases you'll look for. Others are things like how much less. How much less is this length than that length, okay? How much larger? How much smaller, okay? How many more? How many fewer? Things like this. Do you see the kind of general trend here? Find the difference between these two people's ages. The difference of. The difference means taking something and subtracting something away, finding the difference between the two. What does the balance do at the cash register? So, you have $5, you paid somebody, and you owe them $10 more. What does the balance do? You owe them some more money. What does the balance do? How much is left over? How far above? How far below? How much further? So you see, subtraction by definition is when you take something and you subtract something off and you have something left over. You start with something big, you subtract something off, so you take this away from it, and you're left with this left over. That is what subtraction really is. It's taking something and subtracting some chunk of it, and you're left with something else. So that's why all of these phrases deal with things like how much more, how much less, how much larger, how much smaller. Because you're comparing two things, and you're not wanting to add them together. That would be the sum or the total or something like that. You're looking at how different are they? How much bigger is this than that? So in order to find that, I'll need to take these two and subtract them together to find out how much bigger one is than the other, okay? Okay, we can talk about this all day, but I think it's better to go ahead and work some problems and get some practice with figuring out how you're supposed to know when to subtract numbers in your word problems. So the first problem goes like this. A boat is 27 feet long. A car is 13 feet long. How much longer is the boat than the car? Okay, let's read it one more time.